Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I'm here checking out Ghostrunner, the action platformer, I guess we'll call it, that is Hotline Miami's sensibilities, but you're a super soldier with nothing but a sword, a couple of time dilation abilities, and a really big chip on your shoulder. Because you got thrown down to the bottom of what was basically a futuristic garbage well, and you're climbing back up the tower for revenge. There's more to it than that, but there's really not that much of the story in this game, which is not great considering the rest of it isn't particularly great either, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. I do not like this game at all. And I liked Hotline Miami. I like a good challenge, but there are just so many things with this game that rub me the wrong way that I can't bring myself to play much more than the 3 hours I put into it to get footage for this video, which you'll be seeing clips of going on in the background as I talk about it. Now, I will say that the basic movement and combat themselves, when you take them down to their base elements, are quite satisfying. As I said, you've got one hit point. You get hit, you die, that's it. So do all the enemies that I've seen so far, which is nice. And the general mechanics that you've got are pretty simple. You can move, you can jump, you can swing with your sword. Simple enough so far, right? Well, you also have a dash, and this dash actually changes significantly depending on whether or not you're in the air or on the ground. When you're on the ground, it's just a regular old, sidestep, like a bunch of other first-person shooter games that have had a little dash like that before. Think Call of Duty Advanced Warfare or something along those lines. But when you're in the air, the dash changes significantly. Time slows down as long as you hold the dash key down. Excuse me. And if you hit a movement key, you can dodge to the left or the right. And this will let you dodge out of the way of bullets that are being fired at you by enemies. And this basically ends up being your most reliable way to kill enemies, because if they've got line of sight to you, they will start shooting and they will never stop shooting. So you need to basically hold that dodge button, get as close as you can to the enemy, and then, well, just slice the shit out of them. You do gain access to a sword deflection ability later on that you can use to reflect bullets, but it's really hard to aim, and it's kind of hard to get the timing right, even with the enhanced version of it turned on, so it's not something that I recommend going with, just because it's part of one of the problems of this game. So yeah, those are your basic abilities as you go through. You've also got wall running and crouching, which you can turn into sliding. They say that it increases your speed, but it really doesn't. The only time it's really useful is when you're going through one of the game's basically platform challenge segments, and I'll get to them. It's not really any use for you in combat until one particular point, which I'm really annoyed by, which we'll go over later, of course. But the basic stuff you get starts out fine. It is surprisingly satisfying running around, doing that little bullet time dodge out of the way of all the enemies and just slicing the crap out of them. And it is helped out by the game's presentation, which is sufficiently gory for the fact that you've got this giant sword. It's got plenty of body parts and fancy effects flying everywhere. You've got a decent performance. I'm playing this on PC, and I'm pretty sure I locked at 120 frames and just stayed there the entire time, which was good stuff. The only downside is that out of all the levels that I played, in the first third of the game at the very least, I think I got to level like 8 of 17, something along those lines, so I've gotten a decent way through the game, and all this is just starting to blend together, because you never really get out of this humongously tall tower, and it just starts feeling the same after a while, but it still looks pretty decent for what it is. But yeah, it's pretty damn satisfying at the beginning. But the longer you play, the more you realize that the game is surprisingly inconsistent. There are some things in this game that just do not go through the same way every time. Wall running has to be one of my favorite examples, because there seems to be a bunch of different things that get in the way of you wall running properly. Just for a couple of examples. Example number one, sometimes when you're really close to a wall, it can be a crapshoot whether or not you'll actually stick to it and start wall running to it. If you're going straight at it, it's fine. But sometimes when you come at it on like a weird angle, or sometimes when you strafe too close to the wall in the air while you're looking in a completely different direction away from the wall, it's a 50-50 shot whether or not you'll be sucked onto the wall and start wall running, which will also stop you in your tracks and get you killed properly. This has happened to me. Or the one time that I chose to rely on that and I was like, okay, I'll strafe towards where I know a wall is, I'll hook onto it and I'll wall run away. I did that and it didn't catch on and I got shot for it. This happens a lot, whether it is using like the little grappling hook thing they give you, or trying to go through the game's wall running sections and finding that you've just suddenly lost all your speed for no reason. It just gets infinitely frustrating to deal with because you'll be trying to do these sets of just jumping puzzles. You'll be going back and forth between walls and then all of a sudden you'll just fall to your death and you'll have no idea what you've done wrong. This happened to me several times throughout the game. And it is immensely frustrating to deal with. Same thing with the grappling hook things. They expect you to use them in combat from time to time. And you can. But sometimes when you press it, you'll just fly straight at it and then you'll fall straight down like a rock. Sometimes you'll fly straight at it and you'll keep going. There just doesn't seem to be any sort of consistency as to what kind of grappling points do what. And this also applies to some of the enemies too. Not as much, but sometimes you'll find they're out of sync from the way that you worked in the previous life. The nice thing about like Hotline Miami and its derivatives is that they stay the same every time you hit the R button to restart. So that you have a decent idea of what's going on. And that happens in Ghostrunner most of the time. But sometimes, despite the fact you do an almost identical set of movements, something about the enemy behavior changes and just throws you off your run completely. And it just gets weird. There's also a couple of other things, like how trying to grab onto a ledge that you're flying towards in order to pull yourself up from a fall. Sometimes that just refuses to work. You'll bump against the wall, you'll be right there, you could reach it with your own damn hands, but this guy suddenly forgets he has hands, and next thing you know, you're in the pit. And it's just full of this crap. It happens all the time. Sometimes it's minor, sometimes it kills you, but it happens so much that it just becomes frustrating because the point of these sorts of games is that you end up dying and dying and dying again in order to get the right combination of moves that will get you through without getting killed. That's the entire point of these games, right? Overcoming the adversary. But then you add all of these little inconsistencies into the mix, meaning that you can't predict whether or not you're actually going to hop onto that wall. You can't predict whether or not you're actually going to successfully get to that guy before he decides to shoot you. You can't predict whether or not you're going to be able to grab onto that ledge. And it means that you've got no freaking idea what the hell you're meant to do about it. It just doesn't work for me. Doesn't help that the platforming, like little segments, aren't particularly great either, because this game's got a difficulty curve. This applies to both the combat and the platforming. And the platforming eventually gets so bad that it becomes split second, where you have to be going really, really fast, and you have to be absolutely perfect in order to get it right. Remember what I said about the inconsistency? Where sometimes you'll be hopping between walls, and the game will be like, oh, you've suddenly just lost your speed for no reason. Goodbye. Yeah, that happens a lot. Now, the combat is alright when you're only facing the first set of enemies, which is the guys who basically have the equivalent of pistols. They take one shot at you every now and again. But then the game adds some more enemies in. And the one that really grinds my gears about the way Ghostrunner works is the shield spheres. I don't think that's their actual name, but I'm just going to go with that because that's what they are. They're spheres that are basically just little shield generators that hang in the air in the most arbitrary points imaginable, and you have to go and slash them in order to make some of these enemies not invincible. Right? Pretty damn simple stuff. Except, there's no rhyme or reason to the areas that they're placed. There's a couple of situations where they are just completely out in the open, where you can just go straight to them and slash them without having to encounter any resistance, which just, it doesn't suggest any intelligence in the way that the AI plans out its attacks on you, right? Because you'd think they'd put it like way in the back where all their dudes are, where they can all see it, so they're all safe, but No, for some reason this game decides to put some of them just way out in the middle of nowhere. But that's not my main problem. My main problem with them is that they make it so that you have to take a very specific route. Now, my phone just went off. I apologize for that. So, you've got, let's just say that you've got 4 dudes, and they're all protected by shields. And the shield is like over the top of them, for example, right? You have to go for the shield first. One of my favorite things in games like this is being able to pick your route without being massively distracted by anything in particular. So let's say like Doom Eternal, where you can... It's optimal to attack like the biggest threat first, but you're more than welcome to go and wipe out those imps if you're good enough to do it, right? This game, you just don't get that choice at all. Because there's no point in trying to attack these enemies while they've got shields over them. So it just ends up being a... Every time you need to restart that stage, it's always going to be the same thing. It's always going to be, go and get the shields first, then go for this particular enemy that's nearby, and then just chain off the back of that. And they're introducing new enemies as they go along as well, and I don't like any of them. I didn't mind the pistol guys, but the melee guys go in really quick without any warning whatsoever unless you've got your eye on them. So you need to be watching them very carefully, which means you can't watch any of the other people who are about to shoot you in the back. And then you've got these machine gun dudes who fire out like 12 or something bullets. I'm never able to keep count. I don't think it's consistent, and it's kind of hard to tell when they're going to run out of ammo. So approaching them is an absolute nightmare, and the game makes you outright approach them with no ways to get around them in any particular way, shape, or form. You just have to go at them with one mid-air dodge. And then, well, you get to hit the ground and then you get to use it again, but if these guys are still firing at you when you come out of slow motion, you might as well just lie down and die. There's no chance you're going to live through it. Then they introduce the robots. This is very close to the end of my playthrough. I only had to fight 4 of these, but there's only one way that you can take these dudes out, and you have to focus on them, because there is no way you're going to get anything else done while they're around. The robots fire out this huge wave of energy that you can only crouch under. You can try and get over the top of them, but the AI bots are really quick and they will hit you in the face with it. So the only way to effectively approach these robots is to crouch slide under at the exact moment after they fire their energy wave, because their energy waves are super fucking quick, and it makes them just unbelievably frustrating to deal with. You can't use any of your things to deal with them. Even like the special abilities that you get later on. You can't use the Tempest, which is like a short-range explosion wave that sends them flying, because it's too short-ranged. You can't use Blink, which is a thing that lets you cut down 3 enemies in a line cutting through bullets, because not only is it too short-ranged, it doesn't go through the energy wave. So you have to deal with this dude not only in a specific way, but considering that they're probably going to start sprinkling it in with all the other enemy types later, that means I'm going to have to deal with it some more. And I feel myself being infinitely frustrated having to deal with this kind of thing over and over again, just because there's only one way to deal with it, which is a split-second dodge underneath it, and then possibly have to do it again for just one enemy. And then I can imagine them having to deal with 3 of them, 7 other different enemies, and a bunch of other bullcrap, which requires use of some extremely precise mid-air dodging. And it's kind of like the Marauder, in that every time you see it, you have to actively change your strategy so that this thing has to go down in this very specific way, and it doesn't feel like it's playing to the strengths or the potential of this idea. And then you fight the boss, which is this huge fucking thing with all of these goddamn lasers, these grappling rope hooks that you need to hop onto, and it just seems like I couldn't even get, I got past the first stage after like 10 minutes of banging my head against the wall. And it was so goddamn frustrating to deal with that I almost threw the game away in frustration. And then when I got to the second stage and I was like, oh, I have to do that again, but harder this time, I'm like, no, I don't want to do this, because this just seems like way too much. The difficulty curve just took another, like, massive jump. And there are these ridiculous timing patterns that I'm going to have to deal with. that I just can't, for the life of me, be bothered to deal with. Because it just seems insane. Like someone's playing a joke. And then, you've got all the crap that they intersperse it with. So there's an upgrade system, right? Every time you hop into the virtual world, you'll come back out with a few extra slots, a few extra abilities to play with, a few extra like upgrades to play with, and a new ability. And these upgrades go on this little circuit board that's full of Tetris pieces. And you need to take out the Tetris pieces and fill out the circuit board in a way that's efficient, but the more spaces that you leave open, the faster your special abilities recharge. But even with half the board empty, the special abilities just didn't recharge fast enough, and I had to die multiple times before the special ability decided it wanted to recharge. Although I don't know if that's something that needed to recharge. But either way, I found that even with enhanced recharge, I found it just did not recharge fast enough for any of my special abilities to be useful. So that's great. But yeah, that's not a huge issue, although there are a couple of upgrades there which are kind of useless. Like, there's this one that promises you an extra dash charge, except that it doesn't give you an extra dash charge in the air, it only gives you one on the ground, and the one on the ground is almost useless. Because if enemies decide to shoot you, well, unless you are extremely quick on that dodge key, like to the point where I feel like that it's kind of unfair, you're just not going to dodge that bullet. And there's a couple of others too, like deflecting still isn't easy enough, even when you're filling up half your circuit board with abilities that make it easier to do the deflection. What else was there? There's the ability to highlight your nearby pickups on the radar, but I never looked at the radar. I often saw the pickups in my visual view before I saw them on my radar, so that's not very useful. There's the ability to see enemies through walls, but that is almost never useful. And there's a couple of others which I just don't remember at the moment. But yeah, none of them are particularly useful or interesting. But then you get the cyber world levels. They're called something in the game, but I'd be lying if I said I remember.
What can we do?
The cyber world levels are fucking terrible, because the first one I played was a very simple platforming challenge. The second one was a simple pipe game the second one was a simple puzzle where I just had to move the switches in the right order. And the third one was a puzzle where I had to... Yeah, that was the pipe puzzle, where you had to turn these things to make a full circuit. But all of these puzzles were so easy, they were insulting to my intelligence. I don't understand how a game with this in-depth combat somehow ends up with the easiest and most pace-killing and frustrating, but for every reason except, you know, the actual puzzle themselves, sort of mechanic imaginable. It just doesn't make any sense to me. They're so boring. They're not engaging in the slightest. They're just so dumb. I don't know why they bothered to put these into the game. You can sort them out within, like, what, 5 to 8 minutes? At least? No, I should say at most, sorry, at most. So, there's just nothing that I like. It's all bad in some way. Every, like, second of the gameplay, whether it be the platforming challenges or the combat arena, is inconsistent. The puzzle levels are just insulting to my intelligence. The combat arenas are let down by being overly linear. The upgrades are pointless. And the puzzle levels just seem completely unnecessary and stupid for the sort of game you're going for. So, what's the point? I have no idea. Oh yeah, difficulty curve is also way off. That's also one thing. And there's a couple of other things. There are some unlockables that you can get. They're like just little 2D pictures with a little bit of description of what's going on, but they don't really add anything to the story. There's not that much to the story. Evil person has taken over tower. You, cybernetic AI friend, and real person friend need to go stop her. That's basically the entirety of the plot so far. And There's also some audio logs you can get as well, but again, the two that I found just aren't like interesting or add anything to the universe in any way. And the voice acting isn't terrible, but it's not great either. Although there was one thing that was really weird to me. The Ghostrunner sounds exactly like David Hayter. Like, he legitimately sounds exactly like David Hayter to the point where I had to go look up on IMDb whether or not this was actually David Hayter. It's not David Hayter! I was so surprised. I legitimately thought it was David Hayter.
Most of their needs fulfilled right here.
But yeah, that's it. I really don't like Ghostrunner. I was looking forward to it. I played it in the Steam Autumn Demo Derby. But I ended up buying it, and I feel like I've been ripped off. Not the game I was promised. Just way too rough around the edges. Needs a bunch of polishing before I consider coming back to it. This has been Blue Maxima. I'm going to shut up for a while and let you watch a little bit more gameplay. I'll see you all next time.
Wait, there's something coming. It's... I don't know what it is, but it looks... You better see for yourself. You better see for yourself.
That's Tom.
Tom.
Laser array TO73M is a mouthful. Cybervoid time dilation works in your favor, but you still don't have forever. The elevators will soon be beyond our reach. Need I remind you that the clock is ticking? Hurry it up.
This place is impossible to navigate.
Good. These firewalls are what's kept me alive for the last 20 years. Cheer up. If you were a regular human, this would make even less sense. Interesting. Looks like there's a little something extra in the elevator's security scanner buffer.
Little something?
A partial Ghostrunner neural scan. We can use it to enhance your programming.
Why is it there?
One of you must have used Amida Elevator right before Morrow's insurgents disabled the internal security.
Another Ghostrunner.
It could have been you.
Elevator station. Have a safe trip. Warning. Catastrophic core failure imminent. Catastrophic core failure Catastrophic core failure imminent. Amida Station security protocols compromised. Welcome to Amida Elevator Station. Have a safe trip. Warning. Catastrophic core failure imminent. Amida Station security protocols compromised. Warning. Catastrophic core failure imminent. Warning. Catastrophic core failure imminent. Welcome to a
Now you can take it down. Are you okay?
I'm fine.
Climb back up.
Whoa! It's gonna destroy the whole station!
Welcome to Amida Elevator Station. Welcome to Amida Elevator Station. Have a safe trip. T073M malfunction detected. All residents should evacuate the area.
These systems were placed at every elevator station so that nobody could enter Dharma City without my approval.
We were expecting an uprising.
I was prepared for an uprising.
Warning. Catastrophic core failure imminent.
I don't think it can actually see you.
It doesn't need to.
There's no time to waste. It'll only get harder.
Don't fall!
compromised. Amida Station security protocols compromised. Amida Station security protocols compromised. Welcome to Amida Elevator Station.